How healing the past is key to leading a successful and little life. Hi, this is Patrick Herran, and I'm with Sid Clevinger, co-founder of Cycle Breaker Society, and welcome to Client Success Secret Show, interview edition. Client Success Secret of the day is how healing the past is key to leading a successful and fulfilling life. The Client Success Secret Show is for entrepreneurs who joined marketing courses but didn't finish them, or marketing experts who run group coaching programs and want more of their clients to succeed. And today we're going to explore this very particular topic, which is healing the past. And to do that, we have Sid to enlighten us. So Sid, please introduce yourself and say hi.
How you doing, everybody? My name is Sid Clevinger. I'm one of the co-founders of the Cycle Breaker Society. I'm super excited to be here, Patrick. And yeah, thank you so much for having us on. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Amazing. It's a pleasure to have you here. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and who it is for?
Yeah, so my wife and I, my wife's Tiffany Toombs, and then me, of course, we are trauma hypnotists, and our whole goal is to be able to help people clear the blocks that are holding them back, so that they can go out there and they can create their dream life. And ultimately, what that means is that there's a lot of blocks that many of us, especially entrepreneurs, have from our past, whether that comes in from past experiences, our inner child. Meaning, a lot of times it comes from us really from the ages of 0 and 7, and a lot of the challenges and struggles that we consistently carry with us, are carried through experiences that we had at a very young age. And a lot of what we do is we help people clear that. So what I mean by clearing that is, obviously the memory can't be cleared out of your, out of your realm. It's always going to be there, but we're able to help take the emotion out of that so that it doesn't become something that consistently hinders somebody, especially when it comes into high performance coaches and, consultants and experts and whatnot who are wanting to build a business. As in, building a business can be very, very challenging for many, especially when you're brand new. So our goal is really to help people when it comes to helping them be able to clear those blocks so that the emotions don't arise, and ultimately things like self-sabotage, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and many other blocks that come along the entrepreneur's path do not, come and basically block them from being able to create the life and ultimately use their expertise to create the dream life and the dream business that they desire.
Fascinating. I think you did bring up a lot of important topics that uh, I must say that I faced myself.
Mhm.
Imposter syndrome, like blocks, like all sorts of it's a lot of the inner work. I'd say that probably a good and simple way to describe the kind of work that you do is inner work, right?
Mhm.
So, would you say that what's the weight, in your opinion, of continue dragging past trauma in your entrepreneurial journey?
What's the weight? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the weight. Like, how bad
Oh,
is
the
it?
weight. Well, I think a lot of times, I think we hear this a lot, but we hear like, when you're carrying around like what feels to be a lot of times, I mean, thousands and thousands of pounds, along with you, we hear like, just let it go. Just let go of the backpack, just like take the backpack off and keep walking. And I remember when I was first told that, by a mentor that we paid tens and tens of thousands of dollars to work with, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember that was kind of what I was told. And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what exactly do you mean? Like, that doesn't logically make sense to me. Like, take my backpack off. I don't have anything on, like, so it doesn't make any sense. And I think, really, when you're carrying that weight around, not only does it slow you down, but it causes these negative loops to keep happening over and over and over again. And like, I always talk to people about you kind of always get to this same fork in the road. But then what happens is especially when we're not regulated, so like our nervous system isn't regulated, we're constantly running towards safety, and that safety is that negative loop. There's a great book out there that was, that was written that was called Outwitting the Devil, and it was written by the same guy who wrote Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. Right. And so like when we, look at that book, especially in the first few chapters of that book, it talks about this idea of what's called hypnotic rhythm. And if you've never heard of this book is basically around Napoleon Hill sitting down with the devil and having a conversation about how the devil ruins people's lives. And what he talked about was that he gets humans into this idea of what he calls a negative hypnotic rhythm. And this negative hypnotic rhythm is basically a fancy term for getting you into loops, to where you loop and you kind of spiral downward over and over and over again, and you're unable to get out of that loop. And I think like, when we're carrying the weight or we're carrying the baggage that typically comes along with all of this, all of this deep, deep trauma that we've been carrying around for a very, very long time, like he easily gets us into this negative loop to constantly be going towards safe, constantly be looking to go towards safety, when in actuality, all we got to do when we hit that fork in the road is choose something different. And choosing something different means facing, a lot of times what I like to call the demon, facing the demon head on and realizing that a lot of times the fear that we see in front of us, not only is it self-inflicted, meaning that the more we think about it, the bigger it gets. But normally, what I've found with fear, especially when it comes to taking off the backpack or taking off, clearing the baggage out, is a lot of times fear is a mile wide, but it's only an inch deep. So usually when we jump into that fear and we realize that we're not drowning, we realize that quickly we can get through that fear and really break through.
Fascinating. So it almost feels like the fear itself is to some extent uh, like defeatable, but it
Oh,
almost
that's
looks
always
like the fear of facing the fear is almost bigger than the actual situation itself, right?
In my opinion, yeah. I mean, like most of the times that I've been scared or I've had self-doubt or, whatever's been in front of me, it's usually because it's self-inflicted, right? I mean, like I'm making it bigger than it actually is simply by staying still and not moving, and not taking action on what I know I need to do. I think it's really important, like especially for people like with this show, like, you're wanting to build a business or you're wanting to start a group coaching program, or you're wanting to become a coach or or a consultant or an expert or whatever, an influencer out there, whatever that might be, and you're wanting to go out there and you're wanting to start something, right? A lot of times, those blocks that get in front of us, not only prevent us from starting and continue this cycle of self-sabotage, but what it also does is, right, it prevents us from making clear-headed decisions, and then it stresses us out and gets us caught in stress addiction to where now we're just constantly stressed all the time for no reason. So I think it's really important for us to remember that, like, a lot of times, and this has been said since the beginning of time of personal development, but it's literally to have something that we're aiming at, right? Have a goal that we're specifically aiming at, break it down, and then simply every single day go out there and aim at getting 1% better a day. Now, I didn't coin that term. It was my grandfather that told me that, when I, 30 years ago. But the thing constantly being able to kind of chunk things down and then just sort of look at, okay, like, if I want to get to Z, but I need to go through A, B, C, D, E, and F, and I need to go through all of those alphabets to get to Z. And I think a lot of people want to wake up one morning and try to go from A to Z without realizing that there's steps in front of Z that they need to get through that's going to help them get there. And as a coach, I think a lot of people can really relate to this because, if we're coaching somebody, typically with whatever it is that we're helping them do, we're building a framework that's going to help them take step by step to reach specific milestones along the journey. So if we kind of flip that onto ourselves, we can realize that, okay, I need to build a framework, right? I need to follow a framework that's going to help me get to the desire that I'm going to get to. It's going to take some time and it's going to take every single day kind of leaning into it a little bit more. And that's kind of where getting 1% better can be really, really beneficial because it's rarely ever going to be something, that we're going to just be able to get over one day. It's going to be something that we're going to get up one day and get inch by inch, get closer and closer and closer to defeating it. But it doesn't really come about defeating the demon. It comes with being able to regulate the demon so that when the demon comes into our lives, that we're not allowing it to take control of our lives. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this, Patrick, happen, but it used to happen a lot to me was, I would get up and, I'd be all hunky dory, I'd get up and I'd listen to my Tony Robbins or I'd listen to my Les Brown or I'd listen to my Eric Thomas, whatever it was. I'd listen to some other dude yelling at me across YouTube and, and doing their best to motivate me to have a great day. But the truth was usually around 12 or 1 o'clock, something would happen. And if, and the motivation will only go so far until I actually took the steps that I needed to take to be able to clear the emotional baggage that I used to carry with me so that when things would come up, it wouldn't affect me. I used to allow things to affect me and ruin my day, ruin my week. I could tell you weeks where like something came up, I got a curveball as an entrepreneur, and that's part of being an entrepreneur. It's part of running a coaching business. It's part of doing the things that you want to do, running a business in general, is you're going to wake up and you're going to get curveball after curveball after curveball, these uncontrollable items that are going to get thrown at you. And if you're actually unable to regulate yourself in a manner that's not going to let those things block you, not going to let those things stop you from where you want to get to, are you ever going to be able to take that real big step toward being able to, be the man or the woman or the person that is going to be able to absorb these things that happen to you every day, break through them, and ultimately be able to build the business and the life that you want.
That's a huge deal. And I think that there's a clear, important distinction between motivation, which seems to just be a spur of a moment, right? At best, you've gone through and I can relate with this, going to like 3 day workshops that were super epic, people dance and there's music and there's
Yeah.
lots of like shouting your offer and saying
Yeah.
I'm good enough, and then you get at best if the event was really, really good,
Mhm.
you would, that would last like a month
Yeah.
of momentum. And then if you haven't built any
If you're
sort of
lucky. Yeah.
foundation, right? If you're lucky, that's just going to stop, right? You're going to, because that's not real confidence. It's just this mega boost. Like it's an like engineered experience for you to feel like your best.
I
But
feel
then
like it's an experience, like you say, though. I mean, I was talking to a client about this today. It's kind of like real easy. They put us in these environments. And this is why I think environment's so important. I mean, like my wife and I live, on 97 acres down here, right next to the Smoky Mountain National Park. We're in East Tennessee, about an hour south of Knoxville. And we purposely put ourselves in this environment. It's a very calming place. It's very quiet. Like we're right on the edge of the grid. I wish we could say we were off grid, but we're literally right on the edge of the grid. I think we're the last power lines out here before the park starts. And but we did that on purpose, right? Because I think when you go to these, and I'm not like we're huge Tony Robbins fans. I mean, it's not like I don't like Tony, but it's when you go to a UPW, I mean, he puts you into this environment and this energy to elevate your state. He's really big on elevating your state and keeping yourself at an elevated state. But the challenge is a lot of times when you leave that environment and you go back into the old environment that you've kind of always in, your state will just slowly start to digress. And what he'll talk about is he talks about getting yourself like your degrees up, right? Like you're getting your energy degrees up, right? Like you're getting yourself from a 60 to a 98. And if you stay at a 98, you can be anything that you want to be. But when you get back into your environment and you don't, your constant, your normal environment, and you get out of, say, the UPW or the Tony Robbins event or the Brendan Burchard event or the ClickFunnels FHL event or whatever, right? And you come back and then you're like, okay, this is great. But the truth is that motivation is only going to last so long. Willpower is only going to last so long. We have to not only regulate, but we ultimately have to change our identity of who we are to be able to actually get back and then continue that forward motion. I think Tony says it best. He said this on multiple podcasts, but my wife, a couple things, one thing that she's done is she's actually helped people when it comes to quitting smoking. As a trauma hypnotist, we can take people through a process that can help them quit smoking cigarettes. And, like she was, Tony talks about this in a lot of podcasts. We'll talk about like, you can motivate yourself or wake up and have all the willpower that you want, whether it's about smoking, whether it's about drinking, whether it's about doing drugs, whatever it might be for you. I used to be a huge pothead, right? And it didn't matter how many times I woke up and told myself that the day was the last day. I'm going to stop smoking, right? Something would always happen. And I'd be like, okay, I'm starting to be tomorrow. Right, it's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be the last day. Well, the truth is I really didn't start. I really didn't stop any of that stuff and making the right decisions until I changed my identity of who I was. Right, it's not that I'm going to quit smoking. Quitting smoking is a lot different than being a non-smoker. So I changed my identity of who I was and became a non-smoker. And because I was a non-smoker, that meant that I didn't go out and I didn't try to stop cigarettes from being in my life. I didn't go out there and have to say no to cigarettes. I'm a non-smoker. I don't smoke anymore. So like because of that, then I changed my entire way of who I was. And by changing the entire way of who I was able to eliminate that out of my life. But it took, being able to regulate my system. It took being able to reprogram limiting beliefs. And then of course it came from shifting my identity as a whole.
yeah, no, that's huge. You touched on so many important points. I really want to make sure that we address everything.
Sure.
That was wonderful, wonderful. So I think that one thing that's important that you mentioned earlier is this environment. I like to use the term context, and I think it's important. And what I see is that we rely a lot on willpower. We rely a lot on as common sense, as in like the mainstream of online marketing. We rely a lot on super strategies that supposedly like work overnight,
Mhm.
and we don't look at the context as a factor, and I think it's a big mistake. So in one of the presentations I made, I do have a masterclass that I call the Client's Revolution Masterclass, where I talk about what people think the model of success is. So I basically show a graph where I talk about this is the point A, this is the point B, this is the strategy, right? The system of success or framework, right?
Mhm.
And then everything else is taken care of by mindset and action. And that it honestly makes a lot of sense. And that's what I see in mainstream marketing. But at the same time, I want to add, among other things, that context piece, right? And then say I tell, in my content, I say things like, look, you may have a lot of willpower, may have a great strategy, but you can't just force yourself to put a smile on a sales call if you just had a fight with your wife, right?
Sure.
Like you can't just like pretend that everything is good while it simply isn't, because the context is not supporting.
Mhm.
If you don't have time, if you don't sleep well, those things that really help. And it also comes down to the habit, that
Mhm.
incredibly important point that you mentioned. And I wanted to also ask you, like, how, by looking at some of the things, like, how motivation work, willpower, and context, all of those things, what do you think is missing when it comes to all these, like, online coaching and courses that only work for like 5 to 10% of the people? Like, what do you think is missing from your
You think that's like the
perspective?
personal growth and healing standpoint, or do you think just in general, like when people try to start a business?
I mean, in general, when people, not in general when people try to start a business, but to me, the way I see it is that there is a double, like, deadly statistic here.
Hmm.
One is that most people taking online courses don't finish them, and
Hmm.
second is that most people starting businesses don't get far. Like, they usually are out of business within 5 years.
Well, to be honest with you, man, I mean, this might be the most boring answer ever, but at the end of the day, this is what it is, in my opinion, is that people don't sit down and they don't plan things out. They honestly don't look, they don't have like a specific, like, this is where I'm going to get to, this is how long it's how long it's going to take me to get there, and this is what I got to do to get there. And then they don't sit down and actually, I hate to say this, they just don't sit down and do the work. And a lot of them not doing the work usually comes back to the fact that they're not, healed, and they're still living in the same story they've been living at probably since they were the age of 3 or 4. And it's the same, if you grow up, if, like I grew up with parents, like example, I grew up with a dad who, like, and I don't have my family's not in my life anymore. Like, we cut them out due to, having to break the cycle of generational trauma in my family. And, the part of the reason, one of the reasons that was because, so I grew up, and I was the middle child and I was the only boy. And I had two sisters, an older sister and a younger sister. Both, one was about 4.5 years older, one was about 3.5 years younger. So I was like right smack dab in the middle. And I was always given this, like, well, you're the only boy and you're the middle child, so you're the troublemaker and you're the one that never listens, right? That was kind of the labels that I had. And I was always considered the rebellious one, right? But being the rebellious one meant that I was going to be the entrepreneur, and I was going to be the one that kind of like stepped outside of the box and did things my way. And so, like, growing up, like my parents, or my dad specifically, he had a job, and he had multiple opportunities to go and be an entrepreneur because he was very good at what he did. But the challenge was that he always went back to safety. He was offered multiple times where he could do the exact same thing that he was doing. He's in sales, so he could do the exact same thing that he was doing with the exact same types of stuff. He already had a book of clients, and he could literally just go off and start kind of brokering it out instead of working for a big conglomerate, which he worked for FedEx, and made a salary. But he could go out and do the exact same thing but make a lot more money because he'd be brokering it out and then being able to make a commission only pay scale, but that commission only was going to like triple his annual income. And multiple times he said no to that. And he always chased after this kind of safety point to it. And regardless, like, that's not my point here. My point is I grew up a lot, and everything that I did was I was trying to get their attention. So one of the things I did when I was little was I started playing golf. I don't play much golf anymore, but I started playing golf when I was little, and I got really good at it really fast. It was in high school. And I went from like never playing golf to being on the varsity team, in like 3 months, 4 months, like could barely hit a golf ball, to, all of a sudden like being number two on the varsity team because I became very obsessive about it. It was all I thought about. All my energy went into it. I worked extremely hard on being the best golfer that I could be. But what it was I was trying to get the attention of my mom and my dad. Because of that, I wanted to spend more time with them. That was the reason I was doing it. And because of that, my dad would always say, okay, this year, I'm going to get you to the British, like there's these four majors in professional golf. So they have one they have one called the British Open, one called the Masters, one called the US Open, and one called the PGA Championship. They just had the PGA Championship recently. And for those of you that might have heard this was where the number one golfer got arrested right outside the gate. In fact, where it was this year was where I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. And anyway, so he would always say, I'm going to take you, I'm going to take you, I'm going to take you. For over a decade, my dad told me that he was going to take me to one of these tournaments. And for over a decade, I heard him say that he was going to take me to one of these tournaments every single time, four tournaments a year. So it's called 40 times. He never once took me to that tournament. We never once got to go. And, I think that, when it comes to entrepreneurs not finishing courses and stuff like that, it's because like my dad never sit down and put a plan together. My dad never sit down and said, we're going to do, he said he wanted to do something, but he didn't have the rituals behind it to make it real. Right. It was just this thing that was flourished in his head. I think a lot of us, when we get a course, I think the transaction in a lot of people's heads comes from, okay, so I got to buy this thing. And then when I buy this thing, it's done. It's over with. Now, magically, everything that I want's going to come here. And like what people don't realize is that that's just the first step, right? The first step of many steps. And at the end of the day, like I think, like especially you understand this as a coach, like when you get into a coaching, becoming a coach or you get into wanting to build a business, a lot of what we do is we're guides. As guides, our job is to help direct where people need to go next. It's not our job to get on our hands and knees and do the work for people. It's not our job to, especially for us as like healers, it's not our job to go out there and like, get into their body and like forcefully clear out this stuff, like they have to sit down and they have to do the work. And I think at least from what I've seen over the past like 6 or 7 years being in this, me and Tiffany, we've spent I'd say Tiffany and I have spent well over probably 250 to $300,000 in courses or masterminds or whatever it might be, just in the past like half decade. But one thing that would consistently happen with us is like our goal when we got in was like, we want to be the star student. We want to be the student that the person that's running the mastermind talked about. So like that was kind of our aim, right? And whatever it was, like we've worked with multiple people at high levels, everywhere from $27 courses to $85,000 masterminds. And the thing is we would get in and it would be like, okay, so how can we be like their number one student? And there's a lot of reason to that, right? Like, I mean, if you get into a mastermind and you're the number one student, who do you think that the leader of that mastermind is going to talk about? You. What's them talking about you going to do? Get more eyeballs on you. Get more people seeing what you're about, seeing what you're doing. It was a great marketing play for us every single time that we did it because we would get all the people of that mastermind, all the people that followed that person, they would know who me and Tiffany were, right? So I think like people get in and they think like the initial transaction of like I made a decision is going to get them there, but at the end of the day, making the decision, is not getting you there. It's nothing more than you grabbing the doorknob and twisting the knob and possibly cracking the door open. But you haven't stepped in yet. You haven't stepped into the new world, the new thing that you want yet. You haven't, built rituals or consistent disciplines that's going to help you get there. And ultimately, you're not taking action. It's not taking action once, it's taking action consistently and becoming a new person through that consistency. That's going to help you become the person that you wanted to be by joining that mastermind or joining that group program or joining that course, is because that course is nothing more than a bridge that you got to walk across, right, to get to the other side of it. And some of you think that by that transaction, all you're doing is getting access to the bridge, but you don't take any steps to it, and you don't walk on the bridge at all. You stare at it and you stare at it and you stare at it and you build fear and you build blocks and you build BS in your head that gets bigger and bigger and bigger before you realize that you're 6, 8, 10, 12 months down the road. And then it just becomes this distant memory of this course that you want bought, but now you want to change directions for some unknown stupid reason when everything that you wanted was in that course that you bought, but it was your fault for not taking the next step. It was your fault for not taking action, and it was your fault for quitting on yourself again and going right and falling into that negative loop that it keeps so many people stuck in their life.
See, no, that's a big deal. It is part of the problem, not taking action, like for sure. And also, I think that what I'm seeing is that people like have these, you know, past, right? Like you said, you were the first entrepreneur, and at the same time you were the rebel kid, and at the same time your dad, for nothing in the world, would go and do something like independent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right, and I think that all that condition, it was really putting us, um like creating these walls that don't let us, get started. So in my take, it's more empathetic in the sense, as I think that it's the marketing experts or the business coaches who have to lay the path in that sense.
Yeah.
And if they see a lot of people not taking the step, they have to ask, like, why? What is it that's holding you back? If
Hmm.
necessary, like, go deeper, into a conversation and say, okay, this is what I'm noticing, and see how they can, have that breakthrough, and continue on their own. And this is something that I discuss a lot with experts, which is that whether you're like holding them by the hand all the time,
Hmm.
or you're just like giving them those little like breakthroughs, that little extra support that will, set them on their own path, right?
Hmm.
Because otherwise, you develop that dependence between you and the client, and then the good client is just going to constantly ask you for stuff, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just not sustainable, and they're not really growing; they're just being like babysitted.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, you and I could have a long conversation about that, but I think, like, again, it's kind of like defining what a coach is. And this goes, flip it on you being a coach as well, right? Like when you're coaching people, like not just being in the program, but actually running the program, I think setting boundaries is like extremely important. Like if you're not setting boundaries, you're going to get run over. I mean, like there's never been, and I think that's just human nature. I think like if there's no boundary set, like I think, and one thing we're really big on, like when people sign up for our stuff is like, this is the expectation. Like, yes, we want to help you get there and we're going to do, and we've given you all the tools, the resources, every single thing that you need is in here. And it's step by step, step by step. If you go from A to J, you're not going to get there, right? Like you're going to miss all the foundational stuff that you need to be able to get to Z, and you're going to trip and you're going to fall and you're going to get hurt, like, and then you're going to come back to me and say, what do I need to do? And it's, well, you need to go back to A and B and C, right? And I'm telling you right now, like, so that's what it is. And I think like as a coach, that's our job. Like, I think as a coach, it's our job to give them the not just like the information. I think a lot of times people can get stuck into their own framework, but I think it's very important that we give them the resources, because when we're building out offers, right, as a coach, and kind of take a step out of the, like the healing part here, but like when you're building offers as a coach, it's our job to build an offer that not only has a framework of what's going to help you get there, A, B, C, D, but it's our job to also offer two specific objections that a lot of people are going to get, right? We want to make sure that in our offers, we're going to have, answering the question of, someone's going to have, well, I can't do this. Well, that's an internal objection, right? So we want to make sure that we give them all the resources that they need to be able to answer that internal objection. So anytime that they might need help, they can get it, right? But it doesn't mean they have to call you up one-on-one and talk to you for an hour. That's not what happens here. But we're giving them, oh, okay, well, we meet every single week. You got Voxer access or whatever it might be, and you can ask us, you can ask our team, or you can ask whatever anybody any questions, and you have us kind of like at your disposal. Right. So like that's gonna ease that and help people like when it comes to guiding. But then the other thing that is really, really important as well is people are going to say that they need help. It's the external objection piece. So they're going to ask themselves, hey, I don't have the resources to get this done. I'll teach offers like to some of our students, and I'll have this thing where in the slides, I'll have people cliff jumping. So they're jumping off like hundreds and hundreds of foot of cliffs and landing in water. I would never do that. Like, no way. Like, ain't happening. But the thing is, though, is like for me, it's not going to happen because of internal objections. Like, just absolutely not. Scares the living crap out of me. Nope. But for some people, they're going to say, oh, well, it's because I don't live next to water. I don't have a life jacket. I'm not trained. Right. Those are going to be external objections that they have. So then if we're able to offer that kind of stuff for them, would they then, if they had nothing else, they now believe that they can do it. They have all the resources, no matter what the challenge is that was able to get them there. has, then all of a sudden they get kind of into this like kind of like, oh, well, this is everything that I want, and then we give them the reason to take action now at the end of the offer with bonuses or a clock or whatever. But the thing is like when we look at this, like it falls on us as coaches to be able to provide that type of detail in regards to our offers, because when we provide that type of detail, it becomes a lot easier to guide them through the process. And you typically we're going to see a lot more of a not only higher retention, but you're going to see a lot more people actually getting to the end of the bridge and reaching the goal that they ended up joining the course for. And that's what we want, right, as coaches or as consultants or whatever that might be.
Yeah, that's extremely important. I think it's key to have that congruence between the marketing that you build, that you present, and
Mm.
what ends up happening after the purchase, right?
Oh,
People need to be very clear on what the expectations are. It's not magic, and it's not something that will be completely struggle free,
mhm.
but they also have those resources. And I like to make a distinction that I think it's useful to, back to our last point, balancing, how much is too much support, right? And how much is like too little responsibility on the client. And I simply use the terms excuses and obstacles. So to me, an
Yes.
excuse is having a client say, you know what, I got stuck here, I don't know what to do. And I ask them a question like, so did you say that you give this a fair shot? Or like, or things like, do you think that if you gave this a little bit more attention, if you gave this, if you tried it once again with a little bit more, like whatever, a little bit more energy, more organization, more strategy, that you would be successful, right? Because an
Mm,
excuse, sometimes it's kind of an idea, right? You do
mm,
something, oh, you know what, I was rushing like crazy. I had only 5 days to do it. It was a mess. Like I had
yeah.
a lot of going on in my life, whatever. I didn't do it. And then people, for some reason, they don't have, and I know why actually. That's because failure is not something that we talk about enough,
Right,
right?
right.
We either say, okay, this system is the super system of success, right? And we simply don't acknowledge failure as a thing that is going to happen. Even
Mm.
if you have the best system, the best mentor, the best support, failure is going to happen. I mean, it's part of
Yeah.
the nature of the entrepreneurial journey, right?
If I'm not failing, something's wrong, in my opinion.
Indeed, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And then you have you have the excuses and then you have the actual obstacles. And I think, a lot of this inner game happens, right?
Mm.
That we were talking about earlier. Because often, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, especially with the kind of work that you do, that you find people that have no idea that those things are holding them back. You know,
Oh, all
that
the time.
though
Yeah.
that past trauma, that like, identity that doesn't match at all with what they're trying to accomplish, that kind
Mm.
of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, all the time. I think people they I don't want to say they get sideswiped, but I mean, again, it kind of falls back into this like subconscious programming that they've developed over and over and over again. I mean, not to get into like politics or anything like that, but I mean, like over the past 4 years, like I think it's been very, very, I think the world has kind of started to open its eyes a little bit when it comes to like what the media and the news and things like schools, public, well, not even just public schools anymore, but schools in general, like how they're, it's gotten so wild and so bizarre that like it's been a lot easier to kind of see how they're programming us. I mean, like it happened when I was little, I mean, I was in elementary school in the 90s. I went through middle school in the late 90s, one of the best decades ever, in my opinion. But like I went through all of that and then I graduated high school in 2005. But I mean, it was happening back then. But the reason I think that it wasn't seen as much was because, we didn't have iPhones back then. We didn't have, access to the internet like we have access to the internet. Social media didn't start until, I mean, I think what Facebook started in '04, but I didn't have access to it until '06. And then it really didn't like balloon until like beginning to be what it is now until probably around 2016, 2017. Well, maybe a little bit before, like 2014. Right. So, I mean, like when that, so if you kind of look at the progression, the craziness has been going on now for under a decade, but a lot more people are seeing it. And I think like, over the past half decade, it's just almost kind of like gotten so overly bizarre like at how bad that it actually is. But on the flip side of that, I think it's helped a lot of people when it comes to breaking the cycle in their life, and it's kind of helped them in regards to, like just saying, enough is enough. I'm not going to deal with this anymore, and I'm going to go do what I want to do, and no one's going to get in my way. And I think, like there's always going to be those people, in my opinion, that are going to like start something and they're going to figure out a way to finish it. But I think a lot of people get stuck in this like idea of like, I want to become an entrepreneur because I want to make a lot of money, or I want to like do what I see on social, my other people do on social media. But I was actually having a conversation with someone recently about this, and it was like, being an entrepreneur isn't about like the successes. The successes are like very few and far in between. Like, the pictures that we see on social media, are extremely rare. I mean, like, extremely rare. But the things that no one shows are usually entrepreneurs is about figuring things out. And, I read a quote not too long ago that was about, it's really easy to be a good entrepreneur during the good times. But if you're not able to be a good entrepreneur during the bad times, then you're probably just not a good entrepreneur, period. And it like really hit home for me because like you're going to go through a lot more bad times a lot more often. And this is where coming back and doing the healing work helps you get through those bad times a lot faster, is because you're able to be regulated, you're able to be calm, and you're able to make sound decisions because you're not allowing emotions, right, to hinder you or block you. Another great way to look at this, and I always like to tell entrepreneurs this, like, wherever it is that we're talking, is I like to let people know it's like, it's very important that we judge ourselves based on what we did yesterday instead of someone else's accomplishment today. And I think social media has really, really kind of like um, hurt, a lot of society in a lot of ways, because it's became this kind of like, I'm going to post about like my win today. And that's all well and good if the win's real. But I think what people are looking to do is everybody's trying to one up each other instead of it being just like, I'm just going to judge myself and the progress that I made today from this time yesterday. And if I do that enough every single day, right? And it kind of goes back to the getting 1% better every day. It's just a different way of saying it. But it's like if I'm judging myself based on progress that I made today over what I did yesterday, then I'm going to win, right? Because the effort is what we're after. Like the effort is the winning. Getting up and going chasing after what you want, that's the winning, right? Not knowing what you're doing and going out there and figuring it out, that's the winning. That's the success. Because eventually you're going to figure it out. Eventually you're going to win. But I think people don't want to do that because it's uncomfortable, or they have this belief system in their head from when they were younger through inner child trauma that, it's going to hurt, or someone's going to make fun of me, or I'm going to feel sad, or I'm going to feel depressed, or I'm going to do all this. And it's like, but if you're able to get to a point to where like those things don't bother you because you know who you are, and it's not even believing, but you know who you are, you believe in who you are, you like who you are. That was a big one I struggled with. I used to not like who I was. So, in darkness, or when I was in the bathroom, like, and I'd look at myself and be like, calling myself every name under the book. But the truth is when I actually started liking myself, which came from breaking the cycle, which came from regulating the nervous system, which came from shifting the identity, reprogramming my mind, getting rid of limiting beliefs, getting rid of, getting through my inner child wounds, all of that stuff. Then all of a sudden, I would look in the mirror and say, wow, you know what? I'm not miserable. I went through all this stuff, and I can look myself in the face and say, I made it. I'm not miserable anymore. And I think when I was able to look at that and then realize that it didn't matter what was going to be thrown at me, it wasn't going to actually do anything to me. And I was going to be focused on what it was that I knew I was put on this earth to do by our creator. You become unstoppable because now you're only focused on the things that matter. And a lot, and all of a sudden, like we talked about, just to kind of wrap it around into what we talked about at the beginning of the show, is you don't have to worry about taking off the backpack or getting rid of the baggage. It just sheds off automatically, because the only thing that matters is you and the feelings that you have about yourself and where you're going and what you're going to accomplish. And I think like at the end of the day, like, a lot of this just really dovetails back into, like regulating your nervous system, reprogramming limiting beliefs, getting through inner child wounds or inner child trauma that, the trauma that we grew up with, and then ultimately getting rid of all of that so that you can go and shift your identity and become the person that you need to be to do what it is that you want to do.
What a positive note. I really love everything that you said. This self-love, I think it's almost like the core of everything.
Mhm,
And because you might fail, and if you don't hit yourself, you'll get up and you move on.
mhm.
And then you might get rejected, but then you're going to remember that other people might disapprove of you, but you don't disapprove of yourself.
Yeah.
That kind of self-sufficiency is what really like gonna give you that unshakable confidence.
At the end of the day, I mean, it's going to come back to that. No matter what road or avenue you take, it's going to come back to that. We all of us. I mean, it's not even entrepreneurs. I think it's everybody, but all of us have to stand in front of the mirror and look at one person, and and that person's ourself. And it doesn't matter what road we take; it's all going to lead back there. And no change is going to happen until you can look in that mirror and you can look at yourself and you can say, you know what? I'm not miserable and I like you. And when that happens, a lot of things just fall off. But it's a lot
Right?
more than just doing it. Like I said before, it comes from regulation, it comes from reprogramming, it comes from inner child work and inner child healing, and it comes from them being able to look that self in the mirror and shift that identity. And now instead of just I want to become, I became. And when you became, it becomes who you are. Like the whole like non-smoker and smoker analogy, right? Like I'm not motivating myself to be something. I am something. And when I am something, I do what I need to do to get to where I want to go.
Exactly. Exactly. I really like how you're making it so like actionable at the same time. It's easy to say just shift your identity. And
Mhm.
some people will understand it as, looking in the mirror and say, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. Like like that's sort of like brainwashing. But
Well, I think it's
you are
interesting. I think it's, I guess I have this chart that I kind of go over with new clients that we sign up. And it's real interesting because I think this will kind of like be a great kind of like footnote where it's kind of like, if we look at like what it is that we want to create. So we look at success, we call it your dream life, whatever that is. Well, like from our dream life, right? We're going to have to make decisions or take actions, I'm sorry, to get there, right? So like to get our dream life, we have to take actions. To get actions, we then have to make decisions, right? To make decisions are going to come from our emotions. Our emotions are going to come from our beliefs, and our beliefs are going to come from where? Right? Our beliefs are going to come from our identity, right? So when we can look at how all of that stuff is connected, I think a lot of people think that you can believe yourself into success. Yeah, I mean, you can, but you're not going to be able to truly believe until you change your identity of who you are. Because if you don't change your identity, then you're just going to constantly not believe the thing that you're believing. Right. So I think but when we can look at that chart, it's all very connected. And how do and then how do you shift your identity? Well, it starts with, right, reprogramming limiting beliefs. I mean, it starts with regulating your nervous system, then reprogramming your limiting beliefs, then being able to get rid of, trauma. And then once you're able to clear all of that stuff out, right, the shifting the identity is kind of the apex of like, okay, let's open the door and let's start walking in the door and then taking steps toward what it is that we want to create because we were able to clear out all of the bad. We're now a clean slate. And now we can start walking toward the good and actually building the thing that we want because guess what? Right now, we're not carrying any of that stuff around anymore. So now I can go and I can build whatever it is that I want because I have nothing that's holding me back.
amazing, amazing. And yeah, you really break it down so well, like the charts and the beliefs and the emotions and the identity. And as a matter of fact, let's wrap it up with this. Since you have all the resources and we talk about how important it is to take action, why don't you tell our audience what you have for them to, get started working with you?
Yeah, so I think, we have a freebie and we, talked a lot about like, how we make all these changes, shift your identity. We talked a lot about all of that stuff, but where it really starts, guys, is it starts with regulating the nervous system. My wife, Tiffany Toombs, and I run the Cycle Breaker Society, and everybody, and we've had well over 1,000 people come through that program. And where it really comes down to is we want to start regulating the nervous system. But let me tell you why. You're going to want to regulate the nervous system because your nervous system is a start to everything because it's specifically going to be the electronic circuit that's tied to the brain. So I talked about specifically how we had to shift our identity, right, to then go and have beliefs, and then those beliefs your type of emotions and so on and so forth. To be able to do that, there were three things that I said we needed to do. We needed to regulate our nervous system, reprogram limiting beliefs, and then be able to start clearing the trauma. But the truth is we can't reprogram limiting beliefs until we're regulated and we're in a state of being, or in a state emotionally, to be able to do that and do it properly. So there's 7 specific exercises that my wife created, Tiffany Toombs, that's in this 7-day nervous system reset. We give it to you absolutely free, and it's stuff that you can do in under 5 minutes a day. These simple exercises are going to put you into a state of calm. Are going to put you into a state of calm, and then that state of calm is going to help you when it comes to being able to go out there and do the other work that's going to be needed. So you can do that by downloading our app. If you're on Google Play or you're on the App Store, you can go over to the Cycle Breakers app and you can get it for free there. But if for whatever reason you can't find it there, I'm going to give you a direct link to be able to get it. You can just go to resetmysystem.com/reset. And I'm going to give a link to Patrick so he can put it in the show notes as well. And then you'll be able to get that 7-day nervous system reset, and you'll be able to go and start regulating your nervous system, as well as get other free exercises that are going to be able to support you with that right there. So I would highly suggest that if you're looking to do, basically get yourself to a point where you can become a new you and go out there and actually shift your identity and become the person that's going to help you build the business that you want, or whatever that might be, regulate your nervous system. That's the first step. And, like I said, go to resetmynervoussystem.com/reset, or you can get it for free by downloading our Cycle Breakers app on the App Store or Google Play. And I'll make sure that there's a link down here below that you all can grab that.
It's the first time I'm hearing about the app.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting. All right. So you can follow Cycle Breaker Society. You can get the resources that Sid shared with us. I think it's very exciting. I would love to actually just have a look myself. I'm very curious.
Yeah. I'll get it over to you right after this call.
So the links will be taken care of. And thanks again. Thank you, Sid.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming to here, for not holding anything back.
Yeah.
And this was the Client Success Secrets show. And see you everyone next time. I will be doing my next live show this Wednesday. We go live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So until then, take care, and I can't wait to see what we can create together. Bye.